Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on the Sunrise. And just like I promised, I am back here after a few minutes to actually talk to you about everything that is very important, very interesting, especially when it comes to science, health, whatever it is that you name, we will be discussing it right here on Relax Radio. So make sure you stay tuned because I do have a lot of fun and interesting content coming your way. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Um, Now, just a very, very quick reminder that we actually talk about a different variety of topics, right? Be it science, health, technology, entertainment, gossip, current affairs, local affairs, international news as well. We have it all here on Relax Radio, okay? So make sure you stay tuned. Now, for you to stay tuned and for you to stay updated, you can actually follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you follow all of our pages, on all those socials, you can always keep yourself updated and informed about about everything that is currently happening all around the world. um and also, if you want to be a part of this conversation, you can do that because when you download the app, which is available on both the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, you can be a part of this conversation anytime you want. And I'm talking about whether it's morning, afternoon, or nighttime, whatever time it is, you can actually always make sure you're listening to us. Make sure you're giving us your thoughts and opinions. So make sure you stay tuned because, like I said, we will be talking a lot of fun, interesting content. Now, if you have any questions, thoughts, and opinions that you would like to share with us, make sure you text me on 078 because I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on what I am talking about. But also, if you've experienced any of the things I'm talking about, if you want to share your story, if you want to share your experience, well, make sure you text me because you might just get the chance to actually share your experience with everyone who's listening in as well. So make sure you do that. But right now, let's actually move on to this conversation about how there is, or rather, study has found that there is a significant increase in women being induced for low risk births. Right now, like I said, this is a very important conversation because this happens quite often in the United Kingdom, but also because there hasn't been enough research done on it. And, this isn't something that this isn't a field where a lot of research has been done. So we right here in the UK, we're not necessarily aware, or we're not really we haven't really focused on um women being induced for low risk births. And because of that, that is why we're having this conversation, because it is something that we need to focus on, something that we need to pay attention to as well. So before I get into all these facts and statistics and whatnot, I actually want to share this little story that I found, because things like stories always help us understand certain things better. So the story actually happens in Australia, but obviously I saw the relevance in it because we're talking about low risk, or women being induced for low risk births right here in the United Kingdom as well. And there is in fact a lot of similarities that we can find. So I will be telling you about stories from all over the world. So getting into that story now, Emma is actually this 30-year-old lawyer from Perth. And when she was 30 weeks pregnant with her first child, she was told by her doctor that her baby had a big head. So, because of this, the obstetrician actually told her that this put her at a risk of complications during birth, with the potential for the baby to get stuck in the birth canal if the pregnancy progressed to 40 weeks. So, because of that, she was actually um, advised to get an induction. Now, Emma had actually wanted to go into labor spontaneously, and she felt very pressured into agreeing to have to birth medically induced. Okay, obviously, because when you make up your mind, when you have certain decisions made up about how you want to give birth and things change, it's definitely very hard, because it's giving birth, it's bringing a child into this world, and that takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of labor, and to put it well, it's actually a labor of love, but it's also very, very painful, right? So, basically, when this whole thing happened, her doctor had actually booked her in for an induction just after she reached the 38-week mark. Now, she said that it wasn't even a discussion. It was just the doctor saying this is what's happening, and she says it's really, really hard to disagree with people, or doctors, or people in positions of authority, and in particular when you're in such a vulnerable position, which is very true, right? Because when you're pregnant, and you have complications, then the truth of the matter is you are in a very vulnerable position. You don't know what to do. You have to sort of rely on what the doctors say, and you don't really have another choice than to just listen to what the doctors are saying as well. So it makes you very, very vulnerable, but also, it almost makes you feel like you don't have a choice. And the truth is sometimes you don't, because if you're talking about getting complications during birth, then chances are, you have to listen to what the doctor says, because ultimately the doctor does know what is best for you. Now, this is what you said, and this is what you felt as well. But to talk a little bit about inductions, now, inductions are much more painful than natural labor, and the birth was actually a very, very traumatic experience for her. And after the labor failed to progress for several hours, her baby actually appeared to be in medical distress, and she was taken into a theater for an emergency cesarean section. So her son was born at 3.8 kilograms, which is slightly above average weight, but the baby was still healthy. So to get into a little bit about induction, what induction is and how it happens, an induction of labor occurs either surgically or with occurs either surgically or with prescribed medication, as opposed to it spontaneously. So because of that, inductions are often medically necessary, most commonly when the baby is overdue beyond 40 weeks, but also for women with underlying medical conditions such as diabetes. So obviously, when it comes to this, there is in fact a lot of there is in fact a lot of complications. There is in fact a lot of things that need to be considered when women are going through inductions, when women have to go through these inductions as well. And given the fact that we actually also need to focus about inductions that happen in the United Kingdom, it is in fact something that we need to put a lot of research. We need to make sure we put in a lot of effort to as well, to make sure that when it comes to pregnancies, when it comes to giving birth, that both the mother and the baby are safe. Because like I said, it is in fact very painful. It is in fact it's very painful, and it takes a lot of effort. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to actually bring children into this world. So this is why I said I'll start with a story, because it actually helps us to understand this situation much, much better. Now, to actually focus on how inductions work, to focus on how it happens, let's actually focus on Australia for a bit, because there is a lot of evidence that we ourselves right here in the United Kingdom can actually take, or rather some things that are very, very applicable right here in the United Kingdom as well. So there was a new study of births that was done in New South Wales between 2001 and 2016, and it had found that there was a significant rise in the number of women being induced for low risk births. Now, this was actually also because there was no apparent medical reason. So, the fact of the matter is sometimes you can, like I said earlier, a lot of inductions happen when there's a risk of something happening to the mother, when the mother has underlying medical conditions such as diabetes, and it can eventually involve or eventually result in a lot of health complications for the mother. And that is why inductions actually happen. So obviously, because of this new research that actually found that when it came to some of these inductions, that some of the mothers who went through induction actually had no apparent medical reason. Now, the study that was published in the journal BMJ Open actually included 474,652 women who were aged between 20 and 35 who had uncomplicated births. And whereas the baby's gestational age was between 17 and 35, 37 and 41 weeks, it was actually found that 15% of these young, healthy women had actually induced labor without a recorded medical indication. So that just goes to show that with everything that's happening with the change in the environment, in the surrounding around us, that a lot of things are actually changing, right? So make sure that let's keep continuing this conversation. If you have any thoughts, any opinions that you would like to share with us, well, make sure you text me on 07852473473. But right now, let's actually head into a small break, because I have a lot more to talk to you about, induction of labor and so much more. So make sure you stay tuned.
The valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday. And what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. What am I saving or investing for? Why am I doing it? When will I need the money? And how much money do I need? Yeah. So that's quite important, because when you're looking at your net worth, you got to start with saying, well, what do I want my net worth to be, so that there's a goal, and then work backwards. How do I get there? And if I can start with £50 or $50 a week, if I save that every week, and you can go online and use calculators online. I don't have to teach you the maths behind it, but you can say, okay, and if I get a 3% return and I put this away for how long will it take to reach my goal? And that's called just this basic cash flow projection calculations. And it's what we use in financial planning all the time. What we say to clients is we say, okay, what is your goal? What is your objective? Where do you want to go to? And we discuss that in a lot of detail and over most of the meeting. And then the rest of it is saying, okay, in your exact circumstances, with your risk profile, with how you feel about investments and pensions and taxes and where you are and who you work with, and your education level or your lack of education or how involved you want to be. There's a lot of variables that we take into account, and then we say, okay, here's a plan. You start like this, that's great. And then we review it all the time. And we say, okay, we need to increase it, we're on track, we're not, this is what is happening. Because remember, when you're dealing with assets, the valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's a struggle. Yeah. So there are strategies everywhere from £50 a week up to £100 million, and they're different. Right? They range differently from everyone, but and from country to country, to be fair. Different countries have different tax laws, so different vehicles. But from your point of view, at the sort of normal end, I'm not going to call it the low end because I'm in that boat as well. It's as tax efficient as you can get it. That's where you start. You use all the tax efficiencies, and then you step up into different things.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies will ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts, and mainly one because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. That's very important, right? Because you want cars,
very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on air, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies will ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now I'm super excited to be here and educate all of you. And make sure everyone here listening is informed and aware of everything that is happening all around the world as well. So super excited to be here. Now, like I said, you can follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, where you can find all of our content, and you can always find out about everything we're talking and keep yourself updated, keep yourself informed as well. So make sure you go do that, because that way you can always be a part of this conversation. Now, something else that you can do is also to download our apps, which is available on both the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store as well, because that's definitely going to, help you be a part of whatever we're talking about any time of the day, because our Relax Radio is, we work 24 hours a day. So make sure you download that app, because definitely it is definitely going to help you. But let's actually get into the conversation that we were having earlier about how there is in fact an increase when it comes to the induction of low risk births, right? Now, like I said earlier, it's very important that we talk about this, because there isn't enough research, there isn't enough research that is currently being done to actually find the effects of induced labor and why it happens so often right here in the United Kingdom. And the thing is, a lot of the times, when research is conducted, they tend to sort of think that induction happens due to medical conditions and such and such. But the thing is, sometimes it's not only medical conditions. Sometimes there are other factors that contribute to induction, and we'll be talking about all of that right here on Relax Radio. So make sure you stay tuned, because I do in fact have a lot of things to tell you and inform you about induction and what happens when it comes to induction and how it actually affects people. So like I said, you're in the second hour of my show, and I'll be keeping you company all the way until 9 a.m. So make sure you're a part of the show. Make sure you text me on 07852 so I can get to know everything that you want. I can get to know everything that you're thinking about, your opinions, your perspectives, whatever it is. Just make sure you text me, because that way you can actually be a part of this conversation, and I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts and opinions on it as well. Now, like I said, we were actually, focusing on some statistics from Australia, because to sort of compare and contrast the situation in the United Kingdom and in other countries, right? Now, like I said earlier, it's actually found that 15% of these young healthy women had an induced labor without a recorded medical condition. So this seems to be one of the biggest problems right now, because a lot of women without medical conditions, without underlying medical conditions, are actually being induced for labor. And these are women with low risk births as well. So then obviously then we have a lot of questions as to why it's happening. Why is there such a significant increase, and what can we actually do to change that and make sure that the situation gets better for all these women out there as well? Because like I said, induction is very, very painful, where you sort of medically induce your body to deliver the baby. So sometimes things can get complicated, and it can in fact involve in a C-section operation, which has been happening as well. So we'll be talking about all of that, so make sure you stay tuned. But to get back to that conversation, now the study also found far higher rates of medical intervention for new mothers who were induced, and this was actually listed as a risk of induction. Now, 71% of them had epidurals compared to 41% who were not induced. So the statistics itself just goes to show how dangerous it is, and in fact how it can actually put both the mother and the baby at a lot of risk as well. Now, C-section rates were actually more than twice as high, 29% compared to the 14%, and epistemies actually occurred in 41% of the births compared to 31% of those births. So there is a very significant increase, and this is not even like a small increase, but in fact these are huge percentage increases when it comes to all these increase in epistemies, in C-sections, and in even when it comes to these epidurals. Now, over the 16-year time span of the data, the rates of induction actually doubled for the first time for mothers at 38 and 40 weeks of gestation. So obviously that is something that we really need to sort of look into, right? Because we need to understand that the higher these rates increase, the more risk it has for mothers, right? And given the fact that we're currently having a lot of problems, especially when it comes to the United Kingdom, we have a lot of we have a lot of problems in our health systems. And when I mean health systems, I'm talking about, these different diseases. Because right now there's obviously the first thing that comes to mind is the pandemic, that's happening. Like the NHS has been overworking. They've had to basically, put in so much of extra work and extra hours because of how much of COVID patients were actually there at the beginning of it. But right now the numbers have obviously reduced. But still, having said that, there is still a lot of other things that the NHS focuses on as well. So in addition to the pandemic, there are also other disease conditions. There are other things that problems that the health system has to sort of deal with. So obviously when things like this happen, it's actually very, very scary, and it is in fact very, very traumatizing as well. Because if we were to leave aside the health sector, and we were to just think of this in the perspective of mothers, mothers with who are having children for the first time, it actually has a lot of trauma for them as well, right? Because when it comes to getting pregnant and having children, no one actually expects expects their pregnancies to get complicated. Like literally, no one does. But the thing is, sometimes when it does get complicated, when they do feel like they're in vulnerable positions, and when they do feel like they don't really have another choice but to do what the doctor is asking them to make sure that they're safe, it actually puts a lot of strain and a lot of stress on these mothers as well. So that is definitely something that we need to consider. That is definitely something that we need to focus on. And it's very, very important that we actually try to fund more of the research when it comes to induction of labor as well. Now, when it comes to the United Kingdom, every year 1 in 5 laborers are actually induced in the United Kingdom, which is statistic that is it's a statistic that we should all be scared of. Because frankly, if 1 in 5 laborers are induced in the UK, then that just means that there's something seriously wrong and something that needs to be addressed as well. Because the thing is, sometimes when these health problems get worse, when things get much, much worse, it's very, very hard to deal with them. So it's easier for us to do research now. It's easier for us to find the causes of it and to find as to why it's important for us to find out why this why in the induction of labor needs to happen for happens right now for low risk births as well. And that way we can actually take steps. We can actually make sure that when it comes to all these mothers, we can also make sure that they're safe, and that we don't really put them under a lot of stress and a lot of strain as well. Now, the rate of labor induction has actually increased in the United Kingdom over the past 25 years in all 4 countries in the United Kingdom. Now, obviously, the fact that it has increased is also something that, like I said, again, something that we really, really need to, make sure we understand. It's something that we need to put our time and effort and energy into, just to make sure that we understand the effects of it, that we are able to diagnose it, and we can actually make sure that it's so much better for all these pregnant mothers out there who have to go through labor induction as well. Now, like I said earlier, labor induction is, when it comes to labor induction, you associate it with underlying medical conditions. But the thing is, sometimes sometimes the induction of labor can also be related to other factors. Sometimes it can be related to social factors as well. So now there is a research that, or there was a research that was done into this as well. But that was actually one of the few researches that were done with regard to the induction of labor. And there hasn't been any new research that was actually done for this. So obviously the thing is, with time, things can get worse. Things can develop over the years, and things can definitely change. So it's very, very important that this research that happens is consistent, so we can actually make sure that whatever is happening, that all these changes that all these young mothers are going through can actually be monitored a lot, right? Now, lip induction has previously been associated with a greater risk of subsequent childbirth interventions, and due to its link with operative births, it can also be a very costly intervention. Previous research actually found out that women experiencing their first births are actually, in fact, much more likely to be induced than women who had births before. But the instant but what needs to be understood and what needs to be kept in mind is the fact that it doesn't matter if you haven't had if this is your first birth, or if you've had previous births before that. You can still be induced, during labor, or you can still be induced for labor, especially if the doctor sees any complications for you, realizes that there is in fact a lot of complications for you as well. Now, it's very, very important that we sort of begin to understand that when it comes to induction of labor, when it comes to how much these mothers are at risk, that things are actually made much, much more easier for them. Because, like I said, there are a lot of young, healthy women out there who are induced for no reason. And then you sort of need to understand that when it comes to instances like that a lot of things can change, right? So, for example, when I was talking about Australia, and I was talking about how the number of low risk births have increased significantly for no apparent medical reason, then there has to be some other reason as to why these things are changing, why there's so much of other problems as well, right? So obviously this is something that needs to be researched about, but make sure you stay tuned, because I will be in fact talking about this a lot more, and I will also make sure that we will keep continuing this conversation. So make sure you stay tuned. But also, while you're here, just make sure, if you have any thoughts, any opinions, any messages that you want to share with us, make sure you text me on 078 52473 because that way you can be a part of this conversation. You can share your thoughts and your opinions, and also if you have any experiences that you would like to share with us, well, you can do that too. So make sure you do that, because I would absolutely love to hear from you, and I would love that you could be a part of this show. But until then, make sure you stay tuned, because right now we're going to head into a small break, and then obviously we'll be back to talk about induction, the risks it has, and what actually can be done.
Again, but now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, how much has changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense.
They can't accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, I'd say to me, "You had one to forget." That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, "You had one to forget. Get over it." And that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point?
What's
What
the
are you
point?
trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of lose. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. You know how much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? But when you are basically going out and during a day, you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. You buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods, they're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK. We've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? Because in a public company where the stock is traded openly on the stock exchange, the value of that stock is driven by supply and demand, it's driven by emotion, it's driven by news, it's driven by quite a lot of variables over and above the actual accounting or total net worth of that company. I mean, we've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? And the company may still have value, it may still be doing quite a good thing.
Welcome back to Relax Radio. It is, in fact, your girl Sarah on the Sunrise, and I'll be keeping you company all the way until 9 a.m. because I do, in fact, have a lot of interesting conversation for you about everything that is currently happening in the United Kingdom. But today we're focusing on health, especially when it comes to women's health, especially when it comes to pregnancy and pregnant mothers. So we're talking about induction in low risk births and how that has affected a lot of the women in the United Kingdom, a lot of mothers in the United Kingdom, and how we sort of really need to focus on it and begin to understand why they're currently facing all of these all of the things that they're currently facing, right? So to get back into that, before I actually get back into that conversation, I want to quickly remind you that you can be a part of this show. All you need to do is just text me on 078 and that way you can actually be a part of this show. And while you're at it, also make sure to go follow our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And that way you can always make sure you're informed and entertained about everything that we do and everything we're talking about as well. So make sure you do that. But just another quick reminder to text me on 07852473473 to be a part of this conversation, to tell me your opinion, your thoughts, because I would love to hear your opinion on it as well. And also, if there are any things, any experiences you want to share with us, well, make sure you text me, because we can actually make sure that you are a part of this conversation. So, going back to induction in the United Kingdom, going back to how it has risen significantly over the past 25 years. Now, I said that 1 in 5 labors are actually, in fact, induced in the United Kingdom. Now, and I also said that it has significantly increased in the past 25 years, and a lot of mothers out there are having a lot of risk when it comes to the induction of birth, especially if they have had no previous children. If this is the first childbirth they're going through, then chances are they would probably have to go through an induction. Right now, like I said, past research on indicators of labor induction has actually tended to focus on medical risk factors such as the woman's age, the presence of diabetes or hypertension, or even the infant's birth weight and gestational age. But Humphrey and Tucker is actually one of the few studies that's based in the United Kingdom that has examined social indications of induction, where they have utilized data from the University Hospital in Aberdeen, Scotland. Right now, they found actually that while medical risk factors such as the maternal age, the parity, and the body mass index, and a woman's area of residence in Aberdeen were actually associated with labor induction, things like marital status and social class were not. So, a high percentage of women with no previous births were actually induced, which was 36.4%. And in comparison and that was obviously in comparison to the women who had previous births, which were 27.2%. Now, what we need to understand is, in our current developed society, we are in fact extremely fortunate to have advanced medicine at our fingertips, right? Because, things have evolved so much, technology has evolved so much, and we've developed so much as well, that we're very, very fortunate that we have such advanced medicine right at our fingertips. But and actually, because of that, countless lives are actually now saved due to this modern medicine. And because we have access to antibiotics, we have access to sterile surgical techniques and general improvements in nutrition, it's actually, helping to save a lot of lives. Now, with around a quarter of all the births in the United Kingdom actually ending in cesarean section, and over a third of all labors artificially induced, one might actually be forgiven for thinking that women in modern society have actually lost the ability to give birth without medical intervention. And we think that, right, because everything is so developed, you'd naturally assume, oh, this process is in fact going to be easier, you won't really have any complications. But the thing is, that's actually not the case. The Even though we think that because everything is so developed, because everything is so evolved, that you would have little to no complications, that's actually not true. Because right now, people are having more complications than before, right? Because we are actually still striving to find that right balance and the appropriate use of medicine, particularly in the context of maternity services. Now, something that we need to keep in mind is, sometimes it's because of the medicine that we give, for example, obviously you give medicine to reduce the impact of a disease, right? But the truth is, sometimes when you're taking so much of medicine, it might actually mask the actual mask the gravity of your condition, how bad it is. Things like that could actually be masked by the fact, by how by the amount of medicine you're taking, right? And like I said, because we're still sort of struggling to find that right balance and the appropriate use of medicine in the context of maternity services, this problem in fact exacerbates. Now, the proportion of births where labor was induced has actually increased from 20.4% in 2000 in the period of 2007 to 2008 to 32.6% in 2017 to 2018. So that is in fact a huge increase, and that just goes to show that things have changed so much for us. And even though we think that things would, with time things would get better, things like induction will be reduced, the truth is it has in fact increased. So that just goes to show that there must be something wrong, there must be something that we haven't really seen yet, something that we really need to focus and research on, just to make sure that we don't put the mothers at risk and even the babies at risk as well. Now, many women and birth professionals are actually left asking why, because how can the rates of induction be rising so sharply, and how much, and because of that, how much harm are we actually causing to women and their babies with these high rates of intervention? And you know because of this intervention, has any of these outcomes improved? So obviously, in order for us to understand why the rates of induction are soaring, and how it's actually impacting women, we actually need to try to understand the current climate and the culture of our maternity system, right? Like I said, our maternity system is going through a lot of changes. There are so many things that we have to adjust to as well. And if we take the health system in general, there are so many new things that the health system has to handle every day. Now, for example, if you take the COVID-19 pandemic, now that was something totally unexpected, right? Obviously, in addition to all the problems, all the other crises that they had to deal with, they also had to deal with the virus. So obviously, then in that context, you sort of need to look at it in that perspective, to sort of question as to why it is so hard for our health system to balance all of this, to sort of make sure that everything is balanced. Because you need to understand that when it came to the pandemic, when it came to this virus, all the resources that were actually being used for all the other things were minimized, right? They The most amount of attention, everything was just like very focused on the pandemic, everything was focused on the virus. I mean, obviously that didn't mean that all the other medical procedures stopped, but it's just, the virus, people who had got contracted the virus were in fact prioritized, right? And when you are a country that is dealing with a health crisis, then obviously you have no other alternative. You have to deal with that health crisis, because if you don't deal with something like a virus at that given point of time, then things are in fact going to get worse. And we saw that clearly in the United States, right? Because we saw how badly things got. We saw very clearly how things exacerbated as well. So obviously, when things like that happen, when these situations exacerbate, it is in fact, the health system doesn't in fact have any other option than to just make sure that they can try to reduce something like the virus. Because something like a virus is in fact, very very contagious, it can affect a lot of people. So then obviously the priority becomes making sure those people are safe. And that's why when it came to this whole culture of maternity, when it came to all the maternity wards right here in the United Kingdom, obviously there wasn't not that there wasn't any attention of it, but obviously, when things like that happen, priorities changed. And like I said, when we're trying to understand as to why these rates of induction are soaring and how it's exactly impacting women, we really really need to understand the current climate and the culture of our maternity system. We need to understand that when it comes to the maternity system, what changes can we make? And when we make these changes, is it actually going to help? And what kind of help is it going to be? Is it actually going to be very helpful just for the mothers or for the babies? Or what kind of impacts it would have on the future as well? So there are different questions like that really exist. So for example, when you're having these conversations, when you're having these thoughts on the rising rates of induction, it actually sets a scene for the rest of our conversations on the issue as well. Now, this is why it's important, because when we're talking about it, when we're discussing it, it also helps a lot of these other women who went through inductions to come and tell the story. And in that way, you can actually try to find ways to actually help people who have been through induction, to help people who are going through induction as well. And like I said, it's also very, very important to put ourselves in the position of the healthcare providers and to understand what pressures they're under. This is what I meant when I was talking about the virus as well, because it's very easy to blame the health sector for everything that goes wrong. But ultimately we need to understand that at the same time they have to deal with so many different diseases, so many different conditions that they have to deal with as well. So when you're sort of, when you're not aware of all these other pressures there, and then when you don't really understand it from their perspective, it's very, very easy to blame them. But we need to understand that when it comes to things like pregnancy, when it comes to things like childbirth, the health sector is doing whatever they can to their best. They're giving their absolute best to make sure that there are safe pregnancies and the mother and the baby are both safe. However, because of induction, because of the rising rates of induction, and because of certain huge changes within the maternity system, obviously things have changed for them as well. Now, when we're having this conversation, when we're trying to put things into perspective, when we're trying to look at these things in the perspective of our healthcare providers, it actually helps us to navigate the current maternity system, and it actually often helps us to provide it much needed context to these very emotive and important conversations and questions as well. So that's why it's very, very important for us to keep all of these things in mind when we're trying to understand the situation, when we're trying to ask funding for this sort of situation, and also to make sure that we have a lot more we have a lot more information, especially when it comes to induction, when it comes to all the risks and issues that are faced by pregnant mothers, right? But we have a lot more to actually continue talking about, so make sure you stay tuned, because right now we're going to head into a small break. But stay tuned, because I will be back to talk about induction.
Climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
You're talking about mental health. Well, if you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, that would improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's how do you find the motivation to, especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again? It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It will make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, if you think about it, yeah, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you will interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there.
I've been doing this for quite some time. Hey, you'll get the hang of it.
I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And yeah, on top of my bucket list was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. Okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
Base camp, yeah.
At least.
Would you be able to cycle there?
Oh.
One of the easiest ways to increase your net worth is to ensure that you have higher cash flows. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to not buy things on hire purchase, not buy things over months and months because you can't afford them now, but you want it. It's kind of that delayed gratification. rather than buy that couch, that car, that stereo, that computer, whatever item, and pay it off over 12, 24, 36 months at an interest rate, rather invest that money, make do with what you've got, and then after 12, 24, 36 months, take the money that you've now invested and buy that good. An asset could be anything that appreciates or reduces a tax bill. So it could still be a liability, but it reduces their tax bill. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities because that's out of our remit here. However, for our use or our purpose, what we are talking for the listeners here is I would put this definition of an asset forward. An asset is anything that increases your income. Anything.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, if you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods. They're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if that, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on the Sunrise. Now, like I said, we were talking about induction when it comes to low risk births and how there has been a significant increase in induction for the past few years. So that's what we're talking about now. I'm very, very excited to be here and share my thoughts and, even these facts about induction and why it is such a huge problem right now. Very interested to be here and talk about it as well. So I would really, really appreciate it and enjoy it if you could text me on 07852473473, because that way you can actually make sure you give your opinions, your thoughts, your your opinions and your thoughts. Even if you have any questions, experiences that you would like to share with us, make sure you text me on 07852473473, because that way you can be a part of this conversation and everyone else who's listening in as well can be a part of this conversation. So, like I said, it would be actually really amazing if you could be a part of this conversation. Now, while you're at it, also make sure you go follow our socials, which is basically Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can always keep yourself updated and look at some of the most amazing content that is out there, because that is what we do right here on Relaks Radio. But let's get back into this conversation about induction. Let's get back into why it is, in fact, a very serious issue right now. Now, a midwifery expert actually said that it is, in fact, very worrisome that these babies who come out from induction could potentially have another 3 weeks in the mother's uterus, right? And she says that those 3 weeks in the uterus are actually very, very important, because they miss out in their mother's because those few weeks that they miss out is actually really critical for brain development. Now, this midwifery expert, she also pointed to some studies that showed that babies born at 37 or 38 weeks, which are known as early term births, actually had higher rates of development delay and lower cognitive outcomes than the infants born at the term 39 or 40 weeks. So infants from induced birth in the study were also more likely to be later admitted to hospitals from respiratory and ear, nose, and throat infections as well. So, according to the World Health Organization, guidelines, the induction of labor is not recommended in women with an uncomplicated pregnancy at gestational age less than 41 weeks. So it's not recommended because it in fact can be very, very harmful. So then why is there's such a huge increase in induction of birth, right? Again, there are so many questions, there are so many claims about it as well, and I'll be talking about all that, but make sure you stay tuned. But to get back into these effects and the risks that are faced by children who are born from induced labor. Now, although the full term is actually considered to be 39 to 40 weeks, how long a woman's pregnancy lasts actually varies very naturally, and this was actually said by Timothy Moss, who's an associate professor at the Monash University. Now, he said that when it comes to different women, the terms of pregnancy can be different as well. Now, 37 weeks will be right for one person, but 41 weeks might be right for another person. So the thing is, when it comes to all these different women, terms of pregnancy change because obviously, like I said, this 40 40 41 40 to 41 week period is the calculated average, but obviously depending on your ethnicity, depending on your race, things can be very, very different for different women. Now, research has actually found that when it comes to Black and South Asian women, for example, they have a shorter average pregnancy. They have a shorter average pregnancy length before spontaneous labor than the white European woman, and usually they deliver on average at 39 weeks compared to 40. So this is what Professor Timothy Moss is actually saying. Now, there's actually no doubt that medical intervention in labor and the involvement of doctors in care during pregnancy in some cases necessary, obviously, like that's a given. In some cases it's absolutely essential, it's very, very important. But and throughout history it's certainly saved thousands and millions of lives. But he says that evidence also shows that healthy women with low risk pregnancies can in fact safely deliver babies without unnecessary medical intervention. So in that case, it's always best to make sure you're not induced. And we also need to understand that when it comes to these women, they're actually in fact very capable of doing that with very good outcomes in terms of their babies, in terms of their bodies, but also in terms of their mental well-being. So that is a conversation about the induction of low risk births and how it has significantly increased, and how it's in fact affecting a lot of women, not just in the United Kingdom but also all around the world, like places like Australia. So, like I said, this was a very important conversation to be had. This was, it was definitely thought provoking because it definitely made you question as to why, why it was increasing at such a significant amount, right? So hopefully that helped you be aware of everything that is happening as well. But right now, it's actually time for me to, start talking to you about something else as well. So, which is basically, burnout and how some people actually build much better lives after burnout. So, make sure you stay tuned because I'll be back in a few minutes to talk about people who completely changed their lives after burnout.